Hi, I'm Sarah Mitchell. I'm 29, work as a financial analyst, and live in a small apartment downtown. Most people would say I have a pretty normal life. But my family would probably tell you I'm heartless. Not because I've ever been mean or cruel, but because I stopped saying yes to everything. Let me tell you about my sister Emma. She's 2 years older than me, but somehow I've always felt like the big sister. Emma has this talent for making every problem sound like a disaster that someone else should fix. She loses jobs because her bosses are terrible. She gets kicked out of apartments because her roommates are jealous. She can't pay bills because life is just so unfair. My parents, Linda and Robert, never question her stories. They just jump into action, trying to solve everything. And when they can't fix things themselves, they call me. You're doing well, Sarah. You're in a position to help. I heard those words so many times they became background music to my life. Car payments, rent money, legal fees, there was always something. And when I dared to say no, suddenly I was the bad guy. I was selfish. I was forgetting what family meant. I learned pretty quickly that my worth to them wasn't about being loved. It was about being useful. But everyone has their breaking point. Mine came at Sunday dinner last month. You know how some families have traditions. Ours was Sunday dinner. Same food, same table, same tension hiding behind polite conversation. That particular Sunday felt different though. Something was planned. Mom greeted me at the door with the biggest fake smile I'd ever seen. You look so skinny, honey. Are you eating enough? Dad barely looked up from his newspaper. Emma was already at the table, staring at her phone, avoiding eye contact like a kid who broke something. I knew what was coming. When Mom acts extra sweet and Dad goes quiet, it means they're about to drop news they know I won't like. We got through the salad. Mom talked about the weather like it was breaking news. Dad kept drinking his wine. Emma picked at her food like it might fight back. Then Mom put down her fork, folded her hands, and gave me that special smile she saved for big requests. Sarah, she said in her softest voice, we've been talking. Emma's going through a tough time right now, and we think it would be good if she moved in with you for a while. Just like that. No asking. No discussion. She said it like she was offering me dessert. I felt the whole room hold its breath. They were waiting for me to argue so they could call me selfish. I looked at Emma. She glanced up quickly, then back down. Dad cleared his throat, ready for a fight. Instead, I smiled. Of course, I said calmly. If it helps Emma get back on track, I don't see any problem with that. The silence was deafening. Mom blinked, totally caught off guard. Dad relaxed like he'd dodged a bullet. Emma leaned back in her chair with this smug look spreading across her face. None of them noticed how still I went after that. How quiet. They thought I'd given up. But here's what they didn't know, I hadn't lived in that apartment for weeks. And I had zero intention of letting Emma move into a place that didn't exist anymore. I didn't wake up one day and decide to trick my family. This was years in the making. Years of being taken for granted, of being the family ATM, of realizing that being the responsible one just meant being the most convenient to use. When I was 22, Emma's car got taken away. She called crying, saying she couldn't get to her new job without wheels. This job was different, she promised. She just needed help getting started. My credit was perfect, so co-signing seemed like no big deal. 3 weeks later, she stopped showing up to work. Stopped making payments too. Guess whose credit score took the hit? At 24, Mom called me in tears because they were behind on their mortgage. Dad had lost his job. Emma had moved back home. I sent $2,500 the next day. No one even said thank you. At Christmas, Mom gave me a coffee mug that said, "World's Greatest Daughter." I almost laughed out loud. When I was 26, Emma got arrested for drunk driving. At least, it was the first time we knew about it. Dad begged me to keep it quiet, said it would ruin the family's reputation. I paid for her lawyer. Emma never even acknowledged it. A year later, when she got arrested again and I refused to help, Mom called me cold-hearted. "You've never understood what it's like to worry about someone you love," she said. "Emma's life is harder than yours." That's when I finally understood. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a function. A wallet with legs. A problem solver they could turn on whenever something broke. I started pulling back slowly. Saying, "I'll think about it," instead of, "yes." Declining requests politely. Changing the subject when they brought up money. They noticed right away. And they did not like it. One night I sat in my apartment, the one I'd bought without anyone's help, decorated with furniture I'd saved up for, paid for with my own hard work. I stared at my front door and realized I didn't feel safe there anymore. Because when my family needed something, suddenly it wasn't my apartment. It was ours. Just like my time, my money, my patience, nothing was really mine. So I made a decision. I called a real estate agent and quietly sold my place. I moved to a small rental across town. Nobody asked where I was going, so I didn't tell them. I could have explained, but I didn't. Not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. Sometimes when you grow up in a family that only remembers you exist when they need something, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is disappear just enough to breathe. The text started the following Monday. "We'll bring Emma's mattress on Saturday. Dad's loading boxes Friday night. She's so excited to finally have her own space." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. They were talking to a version of me that no longer existed. Each message assumed I would just open my door, rearrange my life, and absorb the chaos without making a sound. They'd done it before. They just didn't know I'd stopped listening. By Thursday, Mom was texting me daily. "Let me know if you need help cleaning before she moves in. Emma says she won't be any trouble. She's bringing her own dishes." That last one made me laugh. Emma hadn't washed a dish in years. I let it all play out. I didn't correct them. I didn't push back. I just waited. Saturday morning, I left early. Got coffee, drove around town, walked through a farmer's market I had no intention of buying anything from. I stood in the sunshine longer than I needed to. My phone buzzed in my pocket 4 times before I looked. Missed calls. Voicemails. I let the 5th call go through. Sarah. It was Mom, but not her soft voice. The panicked one. "What's going on? There's some man here. He says he lives in the condo. Says you don't live here anymore." I let the silence stretch. I wanted her to feel what I'd felt for years, that unsteady feeling when everything you thought you knew suddenly shifts. "You didn't tell us," she snapped. "You never said anything." "No," I replied evenly. "I didn't." There was chaos in the background. Dad's voice getting sharp. Emma saying something I couldn't make out. "Sarah," Mom hissed. "What is this?" "I sold the condo," I said simply. "Weeks ago." "You what?" "I moved out. I didn't think it mattered since nobody asked where I lived." Silence. I imagined them standing on that porch with boxes and bags, realizing they'd shown up to invade a castle that wasn't there anymore. Then Dad's voice cut through. You lied to us. You said she could move in. I said if it helps Emma, I don't see why not. I never said where. Another pause. A sharp breath from Mom. From Emma, finally. So what are we supposed to do now? She sounded young when she said it. Not angry, just lost. For a split second, I almost caved. But I didn't. Because here's what they didn't understand, I hadn't moved out of anger. I hadn't sold my place to make a point. I did it because I was tired of living somewhere that never felt like mine. I did it because I deserved to come home without bracing for impact. And because sometimes the kindest thing you can do for people who refuse to change is to stop making room for their chaos. They thought that was the end of it. They were wrong. By evening, they were at my new door. I knew they'd come. Even as I drank my coffee that morning, even as I ignored their calls, I knew Mom wouldn't let it go. She'd hunt me down just to prove that no matter how far I moved, I was still reachable. Still obligated. The knock came at sunset. 3 quick, sharp hits. The kind you hear when someone's trying to stay polite but is barely holding it together. I looked through the peephole. Linda, Robert, Emma, and a car full of boxes parked at the curb like it was moving day. I opened the door halfway. You found me, I said flatly. Mom looked frazzled. Her makeup was smeared and her hair was messy like she'd been running her hands through it. We tried calling, she said, voice tight. We didn't think you'd be here. It's my apartment, I said. But you said Dad's voice was rising now. You said she could move in. Now we're standing here with all her stuff and you're acting like we're strangers. I didn't move from the doorway. I never said she could move in here. I said if it helps Emma, I don't see why not. That was about the old place, which I don't live in anymore. Emma stepped forward, arms crossed, face red with anger. This is petty, Sarah. You always act like you're better than everyone. But this is just cruel. I tilted my head. You packed up your entire life and drove across the city to move into someone's apartment without even confirming it still existed. That's not cruelty. That's entitlement. Emma's voice cracked. You're my sister. Yes, I said coolly. And you've spent years confusing that with free housing. Dad stepped between us, his voice sharp with warning. Enough, Sarah. We're not leaving. We've put up with enough from you. You owe this to your sister. There it was. The word that had been hanging over me for years. Oh. As if every dollar I'd paid, every problem I'd solved, every sleepless night I'd spent cleaning up messes I didn't make had been written down somewhere as part of a contract I never signed. I stepped back and picked up my phone. What are you doing? Mom asked, eyes narrowing. I didn't answer. I dialed. 3 rings. 911, what's your emergency? My voice stayed calm. Yes, I have family members outside my apartment who are refusing to leave. They're not on the lease and weren't invited. I'd like to report trespassing. Emma's mouth fell open. Dad swore under his breath. Mom looked like I'd slapped her. Sarah, she whispered, almost pleading. You're calling the police on your own family. I asked you to leave, I said. You didn't. The dispatcher asked for my address. I gave it. Emma's voice shook with rage. This is going to ruin everything. Do you know what people will think? Do you know what they'll say? Yes, I said. They'll say I finally stopped opening my door. Mom's voice dropped to something smaller. You used to be kind. I didn't flinch. You used to notice when I was hurting. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, packed with every ignored boundary, every swallowed word, every time I'd said yes when I wanted to scream no. A police car pulled up 10 minutes later. The officer stepped out, tall and calm. Evening, she said. We received a call about trespassing. I nodded. That was me. She looked at my parents, at Emma, at the car full of bags. Ma'am, sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. This is our daughter, Robert said. And this is her residence, the officer replied, which you're not allowed to occupy without permission. Emma looked like she might cry or throw something. You're going to regret this, Sarah. No, I said. I've regretted almost everything up until this point. This is the first thing I'm sure of. The next day I woke up to 15 missed calls. 7 from Mom, 3 from Dad, the rest from relatives I hadn't talked to in years. Then came the texts. Why would you do this to your own sister? Your mother is devastated. Emma's sleeping in her car. Is that what you wanted? I didn't reply. I just scrolled through them all. Eventually, I found what I was looking for, a Facebook post from my mother. Public, 3 paragraphs long, punctuated with crying emojis and a photo of Emma as a little girl. We raised both our daughters to care for each other. But one of them has forgotten what that means. We're heartbroken that Sarah, so successful and fortunate, would turn her back on family in our time of need. Emma didn't deserve this. None of us did. Hundreds of likes. Dozens of comments from people I hadn't seen since middle school, calling me selfish, cold, ungrateful. It wasn't new, just louder. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then, for the first time in my life, I posted my own response. A simple thread with no drama, no hashtags. Just screenshots. The $2,500 transfer for their mortgage. My name on Emma's car loan next to the collections notice. The lawyer bill from her DUI case. A timeline of every one-time favor since I was 22. The receipt showing I'd sold my condo. And finally, a message Emma had sent me 2 years ago calling me a boring robot because I wouldn't let her crash at my place for a month. I ended with one line, I didn't abandon my family. I just stopped volunteering for emotional debt. I turned off my phone after that. Not because I was scared, but because I didn't need applause. I just needed quiet. And for once, I had it. That night, my apartment was perfectly still. No noise from the hallway, no buzzing phone. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old pipes. I made tea, chamomile, not because I needed help sleeping, but for the ritual. A warm cup held in both hands, steam rising like the forgiveness I'd finally given myself. My phone lit up once. Mom. Then again. Emma. I didn't open the messages. I didn't need to. I knew the pattern by now, shock, anger, guilt trips, pleading. Always in that order. I blocked both numbers. Not out of cruelty or pride, but because not every door deserves to be knocked on forever. I walked out onto my balcony. It was chilly, but not harsh. The kind of cold that reminds you you're alive. Below, the city hummed along. People walking, headlights glowing, someone walking their dog in a coat too big for the weather. A neighbor 2 floors down waved when she saw me. I waved back. It was simple, that small gesture, but it was more real than most of the things I'd done out of obligation for years. Inside, I turned off the lights one by one. Living room, kitchen, hallway. No family photos on the walls, no guilt-inducing reminders. Just quiet, clean space. I didn't feel triumphant or bitter or broken. I just felt done. Done performing. Done explaining. Done being the emergency contact for people who never learned to handle their own emergencies. Somewhere out there, they were probably rewriting the story again, casting me as the villain or the cold daughter or the ungrateful child. Let them. I didn't come here to be loved for what I could provide. I came here to remember what it felt like to just exist without owing anyone anything. They told their story like I had vanished. And you know what? Maybe I had. Maybe that was exactly what I needed to do.